The Mustangs of Iwo Jima. There were several reasons for America's capture of Iwo Jima. One of the main reasons was to provide a base for P-51 Mustangs that would put them in range of Japan and therefore allow them to escort B-29 superfortresses on their long-range bombing missions. Iwo Jima was considered fully secure on March 26, 1945, and nearly 6,900 Americans were killed taking it, along with 20,000 Japanese. Pilots using the island knew the cost of their airbase. On April 7, 1945, 119 P-51 Mustangs, part of 7th Fighter Command, flew from Iwo Jima to meet up with more than 100 B-29 superfortresses for an attack on the Nakajima aircraft plant in Tokyo. This would be the first VLR, or Very Long-Range Mission, by land-based fighter aircraft against the Japanese mainland. This mission was not only a mission to honor the men who lost their lives at Iwo Jima, but also payback for Pearl Harbor, as 7th Fighter Command was formed in response to the attack on Pearl Harbor. Originally a defensive unit, now they were taking the fight to Japan. This first VLR mission was an astounding success, with no B-29s lost to Japanese fighters that day, though 2 were lost to anti-aircraft fire, and 1 from an air-to-air phosphorus bomb. The 506th Fighter Group, attached to 7th Fighter Command, was credited with destroying 21 Japanese aircraft, with 6 more likely destroyed and 10 damaged. 2 Mustangs were lost during the escort. In total, 51 of these very long-range missions were flown from Iwo Jima across the southern half of Japan. 7th Fighter Command P-51s, including P-47s and P-61s flying from Iwo Jima, damaged or destroyed 1,062 enemy aircraft in the air and on the ground, for a loss of 174 men killed or missing in action. Weather was a big killer of pilots flying from Iwo Jima. Just over 1/4 of pilots were lost as a direct result of weather. A significant portion of these losses, 27 aircraft and 25 pilots, were due to a severe weather front encountered on June 1, 1945, which pilots nicknamed Black Friday. For the Iwo Jima Mustang, one of the greatest enemies or obstacles was time and distance. The P-51 single-engine aircraft would fly over 760 miles, or 1,220 kilometers of ocean, to get to Japan, an incredible distance for a fighter at the time. Predicting weather over that distance in the Pacific was extremely challenging. Weather systems could completely change en route to Japan or on the way home, causing pilots to get lost, run out of fuel, or crash into other aircraft. Iwo Jima itself added to the natural dangers of a mission. Volcanic islands such as Iwo Jima naturally produce more orographic rainfall, which is rainfall caused by moist air being forced upwards by the island's topography. The island's volcanic ash would further be whipped up by a Mustang's propellers during takeoff and landing, creating black clouds of dust. Pilots had to learn to adapt to the weather, and part of this was learning how to manage the fuel in the drop tanks. Drop tanks could greatly affect a small P-51 Mustang during turbulence, and tanks had to be drained appropriately to manage the weight and balance of the aircraft. Partially empty gas tanks could slosh around in turbulence, making for a very uncomfortable experience for a pilot trying to navigate and stay on course. Looking out for pilots during these long missions was a chain of submarines, float planes, and surface vessels set up to rescue downed airmen along the route. But it was a large surface area to cover. Destroyers were generally stationed at 100-mile intervals from Iwo Jima to Japan, while submarines and PBY float planes worked closer to Japanese coastal waters. Aiding in the navigation of P-51s were designated navigational B-29s, set up along the route to Japan and back. These B-29s gave off very high-frequency radio transmissions that could be homed in on at 150 miles. On average, an escorting P-51's mission would be 7.3 hours. By comparison, a P-51 Mustang flying from England to Berlin flew about 25% less in time and distance. 7.3 hours is a long time in a World War II fighter aircraft. Some pilots would be so stiff after such long flights they'd have to be helped out of their cockpits. To go pee during such flights, P-51 Mustang pilots, like many World War II fighter pilots, typically used a relief tube, basically a funnel shown here, but this could be messy as pee would freeze flying at cruising altitudes. The standard tour of operations for an Iwo Jima P-51 pilot was 15 very long-range missions, about 105 hours flight time, with pilots expected to do further short patrol missions as required. It was later decided that pilots were to do no more than 6 VLRs in 1 month. The P-51D Mustang was the perfect aircraft for the job. Not only did it have the range, but it could comfortably take on any enemy aircraft it encountered in the Pacific skies. The fuel management for the Mustang was perfected for this job, so that the Mustang could fly to Japan and still have up to an hour of time on target to dogfight or attack ground targets. P-51 Mustangs flying from Iwo Jima fired 2,300,000 rounds of ammunition and fired nearly 2,000 rockets. The P-51D was armed with 6 50 caliber machine guns, with a total of 1,840 rounds, and could carry up to 2,000 pounds of bombs or rockets. It was important for Mustangs to use up heavy ordnance before making the return flight, as not to compromise range. Mustangs shot up land and sea targets, trains, boats, factories, anything of importance, and with much greater accuracy than the high-flying bombers. Overall, fighter escorts reduced bomber losses by an estimated 20 to 30%, when comparing unescorted to escorted bomber missions in 1945 by B-29s flying similar missions over Japan. However, very few B-29s were being shot down by enemy fighters. Most were lost due to flak. So P-51s in reality at most were saving around 1 bomber per escort mission, but more importantly, 11 airmen. Overall, Iwo Jima P-51s were able to attack targets in Japan, save a few B-29 bombers, and destroy many Japanese aircraft in the air and on the ground. Furthermore, before even beginning very long-range missions, Iwo Jima P-51s helped with eliminating airfields, shipping, and ground facilities in the Bonin Islands, 125 to 150 nautical miles to the north. Yet Iwo Jima's value is still debated against the nearly 6,900 Americans killed taking the island, as the difference P-51s were making was negligible to the larger bombing campaign carried out by the B-29s. However, securing Iwo Jima prevented the use of the island by the Japanese, either by their aircraft or radar. It also provided an emergency landing strip for bombers. Importantly, at the time of deciding to put lives and resources into taking Iwo Jima and establishing an escort base, there was no way of knowing B-29s would face such an ineffective Japanese fighter defense of the mainland. For military leadership to not take the island and guarantee fighter escort for bombers would have been a huge gamble had the war's most expensive aircraft faced stiffer opposition over Japan. Alright, I'm Johnny. Thanks for watching this little video on the P-51 and the volcanic island of Iwo Jima. I hope you found it astounding. If you want to leave some lava for the channel, do hit the like button. But most importantly, do take care and have a nice rest of your day.